and we're going to get started here. So thanks, folks, for being with us today. This is one of my many webinars that I try to put out there for folks, just trying to give new information on how to be the best supervisor or manager you can possibly be. And a lot of this information just comes from my history of supervision, which I did at New Beginnings for many years, probably almost 20 years. In June as well, provided a lot of supervision, not only at New Beginnings, but also at the South King County YWCA. So I'll let her talk a little bit about herself. But of course, I'm Deirdre Boylan, and I work here at the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I've been here for about 2 years, and I am the program coordinator, and I provide resources and support around leadership and management.
And good morning, everybody. This is June Lovall, and I am a volunteer here at the Coalition, and I'm a former board member, and also my career in domestic violence has spanned through working at New Beginnings for about 17 years, and then I worked at the YWCA Seattle King County for 7 years, and I was the regional director for South King County, which also had the DV program, which is currently now folded up under the East Cherry YWCA. But we are really excited to be here. We're talking about performance evaluations today, and Deirdre and I have done our share of these, and we also know that there's also some level of dread about doing these, so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to maximize doing them. We also have interpreters on the call, on the webinar, so please speak.
Well, we have to talk.
Yeah, we're doing most of it, and we will not translate, but when you type into the chat box, we're also going to reiterate that so the interpreter can pick it up.
Yes, so definitely make sure you get us your questions. We will do our best to answer all your questions. And we're pretty excited. June and I put this slide together, this PowerPoint together. We had a great time talking about evaluations and all the fun parts that come with it, and some histories and some stories that we had to tell each other and share, which were quite comical. I'm sure we all have them. And some are very difficult and challenging. So I mean, sometimes even after evaluation, you might need a little one-on-one with someone because they can be so intense, right? So we're going to go ahead and get started, and, hope you guys enjoy. So here we go. I think some of the slides, most of you guys already know, you've already logged on. So most of them are about participating. If your screen goes to the side, make sure you push the arrow back so that you can have the opportunity to chat if you need to. Your control panel, if it minimizes, just, click the orange button and it'll come back. So most of you already know how to do that.
So for those of you that are logged on, is everything okay? You're seeing what you need to see and hearing what you need to hear? If you're experiencing some technical difficulties, let us know.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, looks like folks are on and hearing us and seeing the slides. Okay.
At the end, the evaluation will pop up. I know most of you are pretty familiar with this, so at the very end, once you get ready to click off or I click off, an evaluation will pop up. If you can fill that out, that would be awesome. I just want to know, what you think. Your information provided to me always helps me provide more information to everyone. So I appreciate if you have any ideas or suggestions or thoughts for future webinars or trainings. I take all that information in. Actually, we all do at the Coalition, and I pass it around, and we talk about it, and we talk about what you guys want to hear about. So if you've got more stuff that you want us to do or talk about or train on, let me know. Fill it out in the evaluation. All right, so what is the purpose of a performance evaluation?
I mean, this one seems kind of obvious, right? Most of us that have been in supervisory roles, it's just part of your job as a supervisor or a manager, is you have to do these, right? You have to do performance evaluations, and beyond the have to, it's you kind of want to, because it's an opportunity for you to interact on a professional level around somebody's performance, job performance. And it's not that you don't interact on a professional level, but it's kind of a sanctioned, set aside time to literally talk about how somebody's doing on their job.
Right. And as the bullet point points out, it talks about a scheduled time. So there should be no random moments when an evaluation is happening. It should be scheduled. People should know it's coming. It's a time that's when you're going to discuss stuff, and it's not about someone being in trouble. It's a scheduled time that happens every year around, whether it might be their hire date or something like that. It might be close to it, but it's a very familiar time. It makes sense. It's about the time that they started, and whether you do it every year, at least both of you know when it's about to happen. It's a scheduled time. And also, too, it might be that you're meeting with someone, after they've been there for 6 months. I don't know if you want to call that evaluation. You might want to call that a check-in. But just to be clear that that's going to happen, folks don't want to be surprised, like, oh yeah, we're going to meet and I'm going to, provide an evaluation for you and I forgot to tell you. I mean, folks should know what's coming. It shouldn't be a surprise. And then you also want to highlight successes and challenges. So making sure that you're really thinking about, prior to meeting with the person, what you're going to be talking about. You've already thought that through. You spent the time to think about it. You've written it out. It's really important for you to, put the effort in, the work in before you meet with someone. All right. Create a plan for the upcoming year. Make sure that there's opportunity for staff to float ideas about their job and the program. Evaluations create a paper trail. I mean, I am a firm believer, like, you really have to document. Though, first of all, I can barely remember 2 days ago, right? So, I mean, if it wasn't for my calendar and me, writing in what time I showed up to work, and what time I left, and what time I was doing things, a lot of the stuff I would just really forget. Like, I just really have to have a paper trail and notes about what I'm doing on a regular basis, because I just forget. And all the people that I come in contact with, it's so important for me to document or write down information. Otherwise, it kind of just sifts off into the abyss, right? So really paying attention to documentation, I think, is important.
I just want to interject here, and I think this is a hard one, but there are times that we have problem employees or employees that just aren't a good fit for the job, and there will be times that you need to terminate somebody. And what's really frustrating is when you look back on past evaluations, especially somebody who's been with the program for many, many years, and the evaluations give no clue that there was ever a problem, where you pretty much know for most staff that this has been an ongoing issue. So when there's no paper trail and an evaluation trail, that's a problem for whether it's you as the manager or the future manager of this person, where it's just a time to really be honest. And it's not to say this person is a terrible employee at the time, but if there are issues that they're working on, now is the time to document them, because down the road, I'll use attendance as an example. If not a hint of an attendance issue is mentioned in any evaluation year after year after year, it's very unusual that somebody all of a sudden has a huge attendance issue, and that they need to be terminated for it. It's typically a pattern. So that it's brought up in your evaluation, because I know evaluations that I have done, there is a section for how is somebody around, their attendance, their reliability. That's the word I'm looking for, reliability. Are they keeping their calendar? Are they on time for their work? Do they show up every day? Is there a pattern of missed Mondays and Fridays? Things like that. I can't stress enough how important a paper trail is, because it will save you down the line, especially if you have an HR department or program. HR requires a lot of documentation to terminate somebody, and most of us here have probably experienced that. So again, this is pretty much to save your own hide and save yourself some sweat and some tears if you've got documentation.
Right.
And also for, sorry, Dee, highlighting somebody's really big successes, because you often have to have documentation about successes if you want to promote someone. If somebody's up for promotion or to bump up a level, you've got clear documentation that someone has continued to improve and done outstanding things throughout the year and deserves a promotion.
And I think you bring up such a good point. I think that it's important also that if you're going to document things that are happening, obviously because it's a problem or a situation is happening, people should know. I mean, it shouldn't, we're going to get a little bit into that later, but, it's important for people to know that you really pay attention to what's going on. And if there's a concern and you think it's a concern, you're taking note of that. So that way it's not like people are thinking, oh, you're just walking past and you don't even care that this whole situation is unfolded and you've gone on about your day. Keep track of that stuff because you're going to want to remember it in the future. And, contracts require documentation. And so obviously you're going to have to, keep track of that, make dates, make sure that when your contracts want to know if you provided the evaluation or the 6 months follow-up, that actually was done. So making sure that that's tracked, logged somewhere in your documents. And I think you also brought up a really good point about, the next person who comes in after you, where's the paper trail? Is it clear? Can they understand it if they read it? Does it make sense? We all know what that's like to sort of fill in behind someone and there's no information there. So, how do you want to leave it for the next person that comes in after you? Making sure you provide documentation. I think that's really important. So, all right. There should never be any surprises during a performance evaluation. And again, I think as we talked just a few minutes ago, if a particular person is continually late, I know that you're making an observation of it, but you also should be saying to this person, hey, I noticed that you're late again. Hey, I noticed that you've missed a couple Mondays. Maybe we should have a conversation about that. But you're also writing that down as well. So that the person is aware that you're aware. Everyone knows that you're aware of what's going on and that person is showing up, or they're not doing their support group, or they're not actually meeting with participants, or they're just MIA. You want to make sure you document that information.
I just want to I'm just going to give you a little tip here on a really great way to manage somebody who has attendance challenges, and that is you literally print out off your computer a month calendar, and every time this particular staff person was late or missed a day, in red ink, mark on that day, late 30 minutes or arrived 30 minutes late or missed, or you make an X through the day. And then when you have that one-on-one with the staff person and you slide that piece of paper across the table, it's a very stark visual to see a calendar come at you with red marks on it about days that you missed or times that you were late. It's just, and it's not, there's no emotion in it. It's just data, right? And if you've got somebody who's perpetually late or continually missing shifts, it's just a really good way. And then you've also got this documentation that you've got this person signing off on, yes, indeed, these are times that I was late or I did miss work. And then that is also your documentation for your performance evaluation that you do at the end of their year cycle, whatever it is. And even if you've got somebody with this ongoing problem, you're probably checking with them monthly at least, and you do this calendar every month, and hopefully see great improvement. But if not, it helps you with your next step, which, after being on some sort of performance improvement plan, could be termination.
Right. So. And making, again, just like the bullet says at the very beginning, there should never be any surprises during a performance evaluation. The things that you talk about with folks throughout the whole year, that stuff should go into the evaluation, good and bad, whatever it might be, but it shouldn't be any surprises. You don't want to sit down with someone and say, well, 6 months ago, you said this or you did this. And again, like I was saying earlier, I can't remember 2 days ago sometimes. So folks aren't going to remember that. If you never said anything to them, they won't remember that they said something during a staff meeting that might have been inappropriate. They won't remember on Tuesday 6 months ago they showed up late because no one said anything. It never was brought to the attention of the person. So really there shouldn't be any surprises. It should be, a lot of this stuff should be talked about when it happens, then some notes should be made, and then you can bring them up in the evaluation. It won't be a surprise to them.
Right, and a tip as a supervisor is to reiterate that when you meet with your staff is your performance evaluation will never have a surprise. You will never be hit out of left field with a piece of information you had no idea was coming at you. So you can make that a rule for yourself to say that to staff when you meet with them one-on-one about evaluations or when you're doing your coaching sessions, that there will never be a surprise, and you hold yourself to it. And, maybe you yourself have had this happen to you by a poor supervisor where somebody uses the evaluation as a tool to be super negative, you know, or they're just holding all this information and going to say, okay, at the evaluation, I'm just going to dump all these 10 things that I thought you do wrong. You know, it's a terrible way to manage somebody. So, you know, if you just make it your regular, you know, your regular check-in with somebody to say, you will never be surprised at your evaluation. It gives them, you know, it gives them the confidence, and it lets them know that they don't have to worry about that. And that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to time out here because we're getting no questions and no chat. I just want to make sure we just take a moment to check in with you. Anything to say? Anything to add on to what we've been talking about? Any questions? Any crazy experiences?
I mean, I think you know, one of the things we're talking about here is providing the evaluation on an ongoing basis. And I can recall there was a time when I worked, you know, in an agency and I didn't have an evaluation for years, right? And so what I did was I didn't provide one, because if I wasn't getting one, why am I doing them, right? And then actually a staff person came to me and said, I would really like an evaluation. Who does that, right? So I thought that was awesome, and I realized that my resistance came from the form that we were using to evaluate staff was so horrible. Like, I just didn't want to use the form, but I couldn't create my own. So our agency had this dilemma of this crappy form that was being used for evaluations, and I said I resisted. I was like, I'm not going to use it. And so what I had to do was really fight for a better performance evaluation that actually got at supporting the advocates or the staff where they were, what support they might have needed, and actually was able to help me help them. So and actually gave feedback for me as a supervisor. So it really took some work to uncover great questions. It really took some work to uncover how to provide an evaluation that was effective, supportive, but also wasn't super lengthy. You know, you don't want an evaluation to be 5 pages long. It doesn't, it's not helpful. And people feel extremely overwhelmed. I mean, we all find it hard to talk about ourselves. So, I mean, just imagine saying, here, fill out this evaluation. It's all, you know, paragraphs, and talk about yourself for 5 pages. No one's going to want to do that. So you can mix it up. You can have some questions. You can have some parts where they describe, you know, how they're doing or where they see themselves. But making sure that you provide one is key, and making sure that you're asking great questions. So as you can see, Lucille Ball, I love this. Again, it's talking about there should never be any surprises. That's her surprise face, which just made me laugh. So make sure the information you're discussing is accurate. It's not hearsay. You know, what you're talking about with a staff person should never be gossip. That is not what I call information for an evaluation. There should never keep your role as a supervisor and the staff role professional. You want to make sure that you're always professional, you're not gossiping, and that you're providing accurate information. If there's coaching or disciplinary action involved, make sure it's clearly stated what expectations are and by what date. So, you know, if you have some expectation, you want to know, you want to set clear dates for folks, not to have them walk away and say, hey, I'd really like for you to look into this or do this. You know, get back to me when it's convenient for you. Really, you want to set dates. Like June said, if you want, have a calendar, write stuff down on a calendar, hold people accountable, say, you know, I need you to have this finished by this date. But having that accurate information and having dates set is actually good for folks. And then always think about scheduling a follow-up check-in. Folks like to check in. Once they're off and doing their work and they're doing well, checking in with folks is really good. People want to know how they're doing. People want to hear that feedback. People want to hear like, oh, you're doing a great job. Or, hey, I think you could use some more support in this area. How can I support you? So giving people feedback is really helpful.
Hey, as we move into this next slide, I'd like you to type in the chat box, and we're not going to call you out by name. I'm just curious, are you up to date on doing evaluations for your staff?
Or the question box.
Yeah, or well, just however, just let us know. Are you current on all your performance evaluations for your staff? So could you all just type in, and we're not going to call you out by name, I just want to see just trying to see what this looks like overall for this group. Great, thanks guys. Keep it coming. We're seeing a lot. Are you up to date on your performance evaluations for your staff? Okay, please keep typing these in. This is helpful to see. First, you got to figure out how to type it in, right? So once you figure that out, type it in. Okay, so most supervisors dread doing these, and they are typically late, and I can tell you that was me. And of course, Dee and I worked together at the same agency for many, many years, and so our evaluation tool was a huge challenge, and also we were not held accountable for the evaluation as well. So it was one of those things that's really easy. Well, it was really easy for us to let slip. What I found later down the line in my career is my evaluation was tied to if my direct reports evaluations were done on time. So that was really interesting because that was very motivating, because if yours is, they literally was part of a check-in of are your staff's evaluations completed and were they completed on time. So if you have managers that report up to you and they're doing direct line evaluations, it's just a tip, just something you want to think about adding into what you're doing, because when your team's evaluation is connected with their own, it's a motivator.
Right.
Not being prepared to do an evaluation, and again, this is little to no documentation, and somewhere down the line here in this deck is a thing about keeping a file or a piece of paper on every single direct report you have, and it's just kind of like a Dear Diary entry, right? Because no one can remember 12 months worth of great success, right? You remember the bad stuff typically because it ticked you off and it stressed you out, but somebody could have been doing just really solid work all year long, and it's easy just to kind of gloss that over. But just writing in or typing in, however you keep track, what this person has done that was, worth noting throughout the year. And then you've got your documentation. So sitting down to, excuse me, to type the evaluation is a lot easier because you've got all the information you need. You've got pretty much 12 months worth of information that you just need to put into your tool, your document.
And I think I really like this slide because it talks about what's challenging. And I have to tell you, I didn't really think about what was challenging me to do the evaluation until I really had to think about it. And I think when I took a step back, what was challenging me actually were the questions and how much detail it took for me to fill them out.
Mm-hmm.
And and part of the problem was that I had to actually carve out time to spend time to actually write about folks, right? I had to put my heart and soul into this because I didn't want it to come out crappy, right? So I had to carve out time. And I think as most of you, like me, our deck, what we were up against was full. Like we had so much going on, whether you're running the shelter, you're writing grants, you're filling in shifts, you're on call, you're hiring, whatever you're doing, like you're super busy and you're trying to figure out how am I going to fit this evaluation in? And depending on how many staff you have, that could be a lot of evaluations. So really thinking about, what is the thing that holds you back? What is the thing that prevents you from doing this? Actually, you have to think about it for yourself because it could be different for each person. But really not being prepared also was the other thing. I wasn't documenting throughout the year. I sometimes would really think about like, like what did this person do all year long? And that took time. So I had to learn not to do that again. And then needing to discuss performance issues. I mean, sometimes we just don't want to deal with conflict.
Right. I mean, that's just a real deal. I mean, if you've got conflict in your own life, doing this on top of that is sometimes just too much, right? I mean, we're real people too, and there are better times than not to sometimes have to do this, especially if you've got a difficult evaluation to do.
And I'll tell you, the reason why I really wanted to do this webinar on this was that I truly believe that as supervisors, as managers, as directors, that if we stay on top of our supervision and our evaluation process, we actually make our staff will be so much happier. People will actually provide way better work because they're actually being recognized for what they're doing. And the folks who are not meant to be there won't be there, right? Because you'll eventually figure that out. The more you do evaluations, the more you're talking with people and communicating and documenting, it all sorts itself out.
It does. I just want to share another tip here. Billy Barnes just typed in, and I really like this because maybe the way I put it about documenting on a monthly basis sounds maybe more cumbersome, but she was advised that if there is, let me just read this so I'm saying right. Basically, it's just use sticky notes. Just use a Post-it note, and at the time of a success or maybe not so successful, just use the sticky note and put it in the staff's file. And you've got all your little Post-it notes there when it comes time to do the evaluation. So maybe you don't have to just type it into a document or write it on a piece of paper. Just put it on a sticky note. I really like that, Billy. It just seems like a simple way to just get your quick thought down and document it, and then you're good to go. You just put it in there and go. So thank you for that. And just to get back to you all, the overwhelming response was that you guys are on top of your evaluations, that you're doing them on time. It's really impressive. Unless those that aren't on time or haven't said anything, but that's okay too. But just it's really impressive. Y'all are some great supervisors.
Yes. One tip that I would like to say is that you know, a lot of programs are moving to putting things into the computer and not having pieces of paper and files and stuff like that. So if you're still in the process of doing things in files and you have papers and you have sticky notes, make sure that you have a locked file cabinet. You certainly don't want all of your staff files sitting on your desk in one of those little tiered, step things, and then you've got sticky notes in there about each person,
right,
where God and everybody could possibly read it.
Well, also you can lock folders on your computer as well, because if you're sharing information or somebody can get into the hard drive, you've got staff that's sharing folders or staff that has access to your drive. All that sensitive personnel information is accessible to anybody who starts poking around. So talk to your IT folks or somebody who knows about how to lock a file, and then you can just keep all that stuff in there.
Right. Okay, so there were two other bullet points, and I really want to talk about them, which was you never took notes prior to today. And I just want to say that folks will know when you're providing their evaluation whether you actually were prepared for it. So if you didn't take any notes and you're trying to fake it till you make it, believe me, your staff will know that. And if you've developed a friendship and now it's hard to be the supervisor, you have really got to work that out prior to the evaluation process. So before you even do the evaluation, you have to address your relationship and your friendship and your supervision with this person prior to the evaluation. I know this can be tricky for folks who work in small communities where you know everyone. But trust me, it's better to have the conversation before you provide the evaluation.
Right, and the reason we included this bullet point is what we do know is that particularly in the domestic violence and sexual assault field, people are promoted from within. You've got a line staff advocate that gets promoted, and they go from being a coworker to your supervisor. So it's a tricky relationship to figure out, and so then all of a sudden you're doing your friend who you go bowling with their performance evaluation, and perhaps there's money tied to that. So we recognize that this is really tricky, but it's just part of the challenge of working out what happens when you're promoted from within. And we can have a whole separate webinar about that, and a lot of us have struggled and succeeded with that. But it's just typical in our field. Happens a lot.
Yeah. How can we make evaluations less challenging? Well, that is the million-dollar question, right? I mean, really, I guess there could be many ways, but communication should be ongoing so that it isn't an anxiety-producing event for either one of you. So,
right. I was just going to say, because oftentimes for the supervisor, if you're stressing about it more than they are, there's a huge imbalance going on there. Like that needs to be addressed because, as supervisors, we did stress it, especially when there's hard news to deliver, and it's not going to be a surprise, but it's a difficult conversation. So if you find yourself ridden with anxiety and stress, that's something that can only help you is to figure out how to manage that, because it'll make you a better supervisor, and it'll also make you feel better. You'll be healthier, because it's really hard to carry around that level of anxiety.
Right. And, you know, just again, we talked about keeping notes and being prepared. I mean, being prepared is probably the key to actually you providing a successful evaluation for folks. You know, I mean, being prepared for anything always helps you be successful. But really, in this space, when you're one-on-one looking at folks and they're eagerly looking at you to hear all about what you're happy about, or maybe what's not working, the fact that you took notes, the fact that you paid attention through the year, that's actually going to pay off in the end. Your conversation will go so much smoother if you actually were prepared.
And can you all share any tips you have about doing evaluations, make them less stressful? We're going to talk about the halo effect. That's coming up next. But if you've got tips on how to make doing performance evaluations less challenging, please chime in. Please, 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 because I think this collective brain power that we have during webinars is really a gift. And you know, we'd love to hear from you.
And we noticed that the folks who registered, there's a lot of folks who have been doing this work for quite some time. So there's seasoned folks on this call who have been supervising for quite some time, and some of this might not be any new news to you. And then there are folks who are just learning in the process. So, and I know this sounds elementary about keeping good notes, but honestly, in this work, we deal with crisis every day, and the notes don't get done. We put it off. And so really, talking to folks, what I have understood is that, you know, being prepared and taking notes actually will help you provide a better evaluation.
Yes, yes. And the halo effect. This is when you're not prepared and you're sitting down to write your evaluation of your staff person. The halo effect is you're just literally racking your brain and coming up with the few things you can remember that happened over the past month or so. That is the halo effect. It's like only the immediate future or you know, past is what's illuminated. What happened 8, 9, 10, 11 months ago is forgotten.
Right.
And so what you don't want to do is have the halo effect. What you want is these sticky notes or electronic notes or sheets of paper in their employee file, or however you choose to keep this information. So again, you're prepared and you can go through and say, oh my gosh, 10 months ago, this person organized a community event that was a very big success, and we got 5 additional volunteers from that event. Right. Something like that, just really detailed what happened and why it was a good thing.
Right. Not like, you know, folks don't want to hear, after the staff meeting last Tuesday, you cleaned up in the room, and I really appreciate that.
Right. Right. You're spanning 12 months. You're spanning 12 months, right? Not the last month or however long your memory is.
Right. When the toilet needed plunging, you jumped right in.
Yeah.
And you took leadership on that. And I want to commend you for your leadership role in plunging the toilet. Like, you know, granted, we all want thank yous, but we want it to really come from the hard work that we're doing, not the things that you just noticed a week ago.
Thanks for asking that question. Okay, so here's a question we also have for you. So performance evaluations, are they freestanding or linked to raises? And there are pros and cons to each of these. Again, you got to make sure your staff understands what your particular agency's policy is. Now, I have worked 2 places, New Beginnings and the YWCA, and there were 2 different ways that we did this. So I've seen the pros and cons of both. If it's linked to evaluations, you've got to get them done. Otherwise, the payroll department is paying retro from when you actually do the evaluation to when it was due, right? So if you've got a January evaluation that you don't get to until March, you've got someone being, you're messing with their money, essentially. You're messing with their money, and they are owed retro pay from January to March when you actually did the evaluation. So that's something to think about. I also, you know, at New Beginnings, I know we moved to not linking the evaluation to raises and just having a set time every, I think it was March, if I recall. March was evaluation month. So everybody knew every March you yourself were going to get evaluated, and you were evaluating all your team. So, and you know, maybe you dread March every year, I don't know, but at least it's all there where, you know that this is the time you're doing evaluations. So I'm curious, we're curious, what does your agency do? Are you linked to raises, or are the evaluations freestanding and somebody gets step raises along? It doesn't matter. And again, the other, I think, big debate is whether DVSA programs should have merit-based raises, because sometimes it's just a set amount, a set percentage year to year. Other times there are merit-based, where somebody's got a pool of money and it's up to the supervisor to decide what percentage goes to what person. So how do you guys do it? How do you do it?
I remember when they wanted our program to do it merit-based, where I had a pot of money and I had to decide. And I was like, I do not want any business of that. That just seems so complicated. But yeah, it just depends on what your program is doing. Let's hear from you guys. What's going on with you?
We've got a couple coming through. I guess I will weigh in with my preference, and that was that evaluations are not linked to raises, that you just have a set time to do the evaluation, and that's when they get done, and their raises come with their anniversary dates.
Right.
You know, I know there are some pros and cons with that theory, but
yeah. So Billy says, this is our first year of being linked to evaluations, and I assume you're saying the money is linked to the evaluations. So that'll be interesting how it all works out. Stephanie says, evals are linked to raises, but sometimes we are able to up a whole department if funding comes through. Wow. Okay. Okay, someone says evals are not linked to raises.
And somebody else is getting COLA. Okay, that's interesting.
Cost of living, yeah.
Okay.
Do we get those anymore?
Yeah, so this is just something to think about at your agency. It's a great topic for staff meeting is, you know, should our performance evaluations be linked to raises or not? Right. And I think you'll and people like being part of that conversation anyway, but I think you'll have a really interesting discussion.
And also I mean, I don't know how people feel about it, if folks feel comfortable knowing that my performance is actually going to be linked to whether or not I get a raise. You know, I don't know how people feel about that. Do people feel like they work harder and better because they know that if they don't, the raise isn't going to come? Or does the raise actually come no matter what?
Well, I'll tell you, in non-DV and other, you know, I've heard examples of this where, talk about the halo effect, you have somebody who can be super calculating and just pour it on 3 months before they know their evaluation is going to happen, and they just look like a superstar when it comes time for their supervisor to sit down and think about what this particular person's done over the past year, when all you have the halo effect of all you can think about is this like fabulous thing this person did a month ago, right? And you bet that person's going to get more money because that person just did a great big thing. Right? So again, pros and cons.
Right. And when you're thinking about how it should be, whether it's linked to money or not linked to money, don't think that process can't change. It won't change overnight. It might not change within a year, but start having the conversation. If you don't feel like that process is actually working for you, start having conversations about it to see what other options there are. Because I definitely feel like if it's not working, if it's uncomfortable, if it just isn't something that your agency, you know, is working well with, it should come to the table and have discussion about it. It's not going to change itself. So someone has to start the conversation of what could we do differently to provide raises, and should they or should they not be linked to a performance evaluation?
Right. And I guess here's another tip as a supervisor is if your evaluations are on the anniversary date, again, it's not a set month out of the year. If you've got 6 direct reports and 6 different anniversary dates, it's really helpful to have one piece of paper or one document where you have each of your staff people listed and the date that their evaluation is due. And then also put that in your calendar with a month lead in, right? So if I have to do an evaluation on Deidre that's due in July, I would tickle that, use a tickler file, use it for June. And that gives yourself, 4 weeks to make sure it's done on time. So, I know some of you have a lot of people that report directly to you and have a lot of evaluations to do, but it just saves yourself that stress of, oh my gosh, who do I have this month? Like if you just sit there and with your Outlook, I'm going to assume everybody uses Outlook or some similar calendar program, and just put them in your calendar with a 4-week lead-in time, it just lifts that worry off of if you're going to miss somebody, especially if your evaluation is tied to when your staff's evaluations are done, right? It won't slip.
And I think I think June and I are stressing so much about pre-planning only because we realize like everyone's super busy and you have to squeeze them in. And some people have way more staff than others, and squeezing them in is painful.
Well, and I guess, you know, when you're triaging all the things you have on your plate to do, for me anyway, personally, the evaluations are the thing that slipped to the bottom of my priority list every time, so consistently. It was just the easiest thing to push aside for me. Now, others, I mean, you know, you're better people, but it was, I was terrible that way, where I would just let it slip because I figured the 5 other things seemed more important to me. This person's doing great work. They know they're doing great work. I give them a lot of praise. You know, they know they're okay. But really, that's not fair to the staff, and you have to prioritize your staff. And, you know, it took me a long time to learn that. So
right. And they want it. Staff want it. Yeah. They want it. They want to know the feedback. All right. The actual evaluation tool. So, you know, we wanted to talk about the tool.
Can I just, while we're moving through this slide, if you could chime in. I'm curious, my question to you is, how long is your evaluation tool? Because Deirdre mentioned, you know, nobody wants to go on for 5 pages, right? Well, I've had evaluation tools that were 10, 12 pages. I remember those. So could you just type in how long your agency's evaluation tool is for staff? And then we're going to move through this slide.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this too, about like, you know, if your evaluation tool is working for you or not working for you, like how to go back to the team and say, this actually isn't working. Ask your staff, do they feel supported, or do they feel like the evaluation is working for them? You want to know if your tool is, if it's old, if it's outdated, if it's not giving you the results that you're looking for to help you be supportive to your staff. This is the time that you want to say, let's put this on our agenda as management to discuss how we plan to make changes to this. Again, like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while. I mean, I remember when we decided to revamp our evaluation, it probably took over a year to actually do a search, find the great questions that we wanted for our program. Not everybody wants the same questions, so you know, you have to figure out what questions actually work for you and your staff and what you're doing, and how to get the most out of those questions. So I think it's real important that when was the last time your agency reviewed those changes? Let's see what folks did folks have anything. Ours is 5 pages long. This is Lori. Ours is 5 pages long, and if it's an employee who has been employed over 5 years, there's a shorter 1-page version.
Wow, that is creative.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've only heard from a couple people, but please type in how long your evaluation tool is.
Right.
And again, bring up with your supervisor next time. If you don't know, ask them, when's the last time our tool was evaluated and changed?
Yeah, Joanne says 2 pages, so that's not too bad.
Yeah. What was I going to, I had something on deck of my head about this tool.
Billy says 1 page of number ranges. Oh, okay, so you do the number range thing, 1 out of 10 for questions, performance.
Oh, that was it.
Then 2nd page, room for questions and goals. Okay, that's good.
When you have a ranking, like what you're ranking somebody 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, that is really subjective. The more text, the more like essay type responses to questions is more valuable for staff, because really somebody's 3 is another person's 4 is a 2, and people tend to really fixate on the number, right? If you're a 1 to 5 and you're not getting a 5 because you're not walking on water, you're only getting a 4. Those numbers can really affect a person. So I would keep those numerical rankings to a minimum and move more toward the essay part where they're really going to get valuable feedback that's specific and detailed. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So great responses. Thank you.
That's definitely.
Yeah. So just I would say if you can make a change to your form, is to move away from scaling 1 to whatever, because that doesn't mean a lot. It depends on who's ranking you that day and what kind of morning they had, and also how it's interpreted.
Mhm.
So, okay, let's
Yes,
keep
so,
going.
so the staff fills out a page. I was just reading Stephanie's, and Jason says 10 pages? Did I? Oh, six pages. Woo. Well, 6 pages. That's still a lot. Billy says the HR department is working on changes. Yeah. So I mean, I think.
Well, sorry, this is a great point because this one evaluation is being used across all the departments at the tribe,
Yeah.
right? So if you are a smaller program within a bigger entity like a county, I understand, right? We know it's not up to you to change it, but you know, it's still worth asking the question. And this is 64 different departments throughout the tribe. Yeah, that's like moving a barge. That's a lot. But
you know, and what I would say is if you don't have the ability to actually make change on the evaluation forms, we always have the ability to do, you know, just one-on-ones every, you know, quarterly or 6 months with folks. And those questions can be different. You can add questions to that. You can create your own questions for dialogue with folks outside of the regular evaluation. So if you're feeling like, you know, changing your agency-wide evaluation isn't a possibility, just think about ways to meet with your staff throughout the year, whether it's quarterly or every 6 months, to just discuss whatever questions that you think are important or questions that you think will help support you and support them.
That's great. We're on the actual evaluation tool.
Yes.
So you can Google performance evaluation and hundreds will come up. So, because one of the questions I think Deirdre got was, is there a tool you can recommend or what, you know, but there are just so many.
Right.
And sometimes it's just not up to you. Your agency already has that tool. So but if you really want to poke around, our recommendation is to just poke around and pull up, you know, some that seem good to you. One is not, I mean, what I found is when I did this is there are pieces of several that looked good to me.
Right. And I was saying to June, like, what are some of the questions that we, you know, thought might be helpful? Now, they might not work for you, but we were just kind of thinking about what would be helpful. And is this job still a good fit for you? Why or why not? And I honestly believe, I love that question because I want to know. I want to know, is this job still a good fit? And you'd be surprised how honest people would be.
Right, because this could just be a stepping stone. You know, I need to work here for about a year because I'm applying for my grad program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know that. I think that's helpful to know. And I think when you've got lifers in the DV field, somebody's working 15, 20 plus years, you know, when you meet a young person who literally this is a stepping stone, it can take you aback. But I think that's great. I think it's good to know where people are at.
And I think we fear the honesty because we know that sometimes these positions are hard to fill.
Yes.
So we don't even want to know if people want to leave. We're like, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Just stay forever. Because they're great, right? But oftentimes they don't want to tell us that they actually are going to take on something new in a year or go back to school. So then we don't find out till the last minute. Right. I'd rather know early enough that this person is planning to leave or do something new within the next year rather than not know.
Oh yeah, I'd rather have an awesome person for 12 months.
Totally.
And be able to plan for their exit and a smooth rehire than somebody who is just like, I'm 45 and I plan to retire out of here. And they're just a mediocre employee. That's rough. I've had that happen. I want to address a question that came up. Is will you be emailing the PowerPoint? The answer is no. This is going to be posted on the Coalition's website, so you'll be able to pick it up off of there.
And if it should be posted on the website within the next several weeks because it's really super crazy around here with 5K coming up. But if it's not and you really need it, if you can email me, my email will be at the end of the slide. Or go online, you can find it. Email me and I can send it to you.
And the next one, if you don't have, I think we reiterated many, many times how important it is to have regular check-ins. One, so there are no surprises at the evaluation, and two, because it's just good to know how your staff person is doing, and it doesn't have to be a 1-hour check-in. If you just ask one question, this is just another tip, if you just ask one question, and that is, what do you want more of and what do you want less of? You will find that to be such a helpful question to ask, and then you just sit back and listen, right? You just listen. What do they want more of? what do they want less of?
Yeah.
And if you think about what if somebody asked me that question, how would you answer it? You'll see how kind of a profound question that is, right? And that could just be a 15-minute conversation and you're done. So it doesn't have to be a big old thing to do a check-in. It can be as simple as this one question.
Right, and it gets, to me, it says my supervisor cares because they want to know, what do I want more of? And I could say what I want more of. And honestly, you can just say, and what I want less of is micromanagement. What I want less of is whatever it might be.
I want less of you in my hair.
Right.
Okay, at least you know that, and it gives you a chance to check yourself of why does this person feel like I'm all up in it?
Right, totally. Which leads us to that next bullet point, which is how can I better supervise you? And I know that, we're probably thinking, why would I ask that question? But honestly, don't be afraid of the answer, because if you want to be a supervisor that's helpful, that's mentoring, that's guiding someone, that's doing the best you can possibly, ask the question. People will honestly tell you. And it might be eye-opening for you as an individual, but it will help you grow. We should not be afraid to ask that question, because the interesting thing is, who observes us the most? Our staff. Usually the person who is doing our evaluation as management is actually watching us on a daily basis, right? So getting feedback from our staff actually can be eye-opening, and you can learn a lot from the staff that you supervise. And what accomplishments are you most proud of? If someone says nothing, that's a clue, right? People should be able to remember their accomplishments and be proud of them. If they don't feel like they've made any accomplishments, or they can't remember what they did that they feel good about, that's a guide to help you to say, okay, let's work on that. How can we do better? So let's go to the next question.
Well, just a continuation of the actual tool. Some other examples are, where do you see yourself in the next few years? And again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, that it's just good to know. And if the answer is that they want to be at the agency, what is going to make this experience worthwhile for you? And again, I think that's a powerful question, because when you ask somebody what would make it worthwhile, that's very different than, I'm just going to work the swing shift for the next 6 months and make sure all my shifts are covered.
Yep.
Right? Are there areas of your job that you would like more support with? I think you will always get an answer to this, and it will always be, I wish you would hire another person. Right?
Or I need more money.
Yeah, or yeah. So you can kind of anticipate that. And what new skills have you uncovered about yourself? And again, this is then projecting onto staff that you have this expectation that they aren't just stagnant, right? That they're learning, they're reaching out to gain new skills, training, whatever.
And going back to that one bullet point, are there any areas of your job that you would like more support with? Also will clue you in on, if they're doing things in their job that actually isn't in their job description, you might want to take note of that. A lot of times folks' positions and people start doing more things that aren't actually in their job descriptions, but they never actually get put into the job description. And so that's okay. Let me go back here. Sorry. No, it's okay.
I'm sorry. I leaned over. I was trying to answer a question. Sarah Glorion, the answer is yes. Yes, we will email that to you.
Okay.
There we go.
I don't know where we're at. Let me see.
We are.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Oh, man. Sorry about your eyes, guys. That was me. That was me leaning on the keyboard.
Let's see. There we go.
Next. Okay. Right there. So we were on, since your last evaluation.
Yep. And then just talking about making sure that what they're doing is in their job description. New skills that they've uncovered about themselves. Since your last evaluation, what have they taken initiative to do? If folks can't remember their last evaluation, that should be brought up. I mean, you can even bring their last evaluation.
Right, because you're doing goals, right? Every year you're doing goals.
Yep.
So what I used to do is I used to cut and paste the goals from the last year evaluation and put it into this year's evaluation. Literally, it's a checklist. You're going through and saying, these are the goals that you set for yourself last year. What have you accomplished out of this list? Which ones have you accomplished? And sometimes they didn't accomplish them all. That's why we're not asking for 10 goals. 3 to 5 is usually a good number, and sometimes there are going to be carryover goals into the next year. But you as the supervisor being consistent, and they're seeing, oh gosh, they're keeping track, like I set these goals last year. And here's another tip. Prior to their evaluation, when you email them to set up the meeting to do the evaluation, paste those goals into that email. These are the goals that you set out for yourself last year. We're going to discuss what you've done to meet these goals during your evaluation. So it also reminds them, and they don't have to go searching through their documents. You put it in the email that indeed we're going to be talking about this at our meeting.
Yeah.
So
I like that. I
Yeah,
liked when
maybe.
my supervisor said, this is what you said you wanted to accomplish. Let's talk about these things. And then it kind of gave me a cue like, oh yeah, I did say I wanted to do these things, and made me really think about whether
I better get to it.
I better get to it. Or why did I not do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. As your supervisor, what I see challenges you. So the reason why I think this question was great is like, as your supervisor, what I see challenges you the most is, and I think I, as a supervisor, I just want to be very upfront with my staff to let them know that I'm aware of where they're being challenged. I can see it. I'm observing it, and I want to know, how can I support you in that area? Again, going back to there should be no surprises. I want folks to know that I'm observing, I'm watching. I can see what's working well and what's not working well, and what can I do to make this better? But also too, I want to hold that person accountable and say, hey, what can you do to make the changes?
Well, I just think that's great language too. It's not blaming. It just opens up the conversation. You know, and it can potentially open up a difficult conversation. Just that wording is very nice. Now we have some brainstorming. You're really going to have to figure out how to type into the box now.
Right. Yes. So what are your ideas for the most effective way to deliver evaluations? So we want to hear from you.
Yeah, what worked? What worked for you? And we're just going to, you know, be quiet for a few seconds here while you furiously type in your responses.
You know, and I'll just say something really quick, is the one time I had an evaluation, and they said they wanted to take me to dinner. And I have to say, the meal was amazing, but I couldn't focus on the evaluation because the waiters and waitresses are coming to the table, and, distractions were happening. And it was kind of nerve-wracking to have so much going on around me. And I know this person thought it was a great idea. However, I was completely distracted and couldn't focus in that situation. So sometimes great ideas about being in areas other than your office, you really want to check with the person first to make sure that that setting is a good setting for them.
Yes.
And then sometimes people are really intimidated by coming into the supervisor's office by thinking they're in trouble, or it sets this tone, or it's the dreaded evaluation. So possibly having it in a different area within the building could be helpful. But we want to know, what are your ideas for the most effective way to deliver evaluations? Go.
Go. We have some responses. We will not call you out by name, so don't worry, unless you say. Oh, so here's one that says, I have them fill out their evaluation and I fill one out and we compare and discuss. Thank you. We are going to talk about this because there are a couple different options about that, and that can get awkward.
Yeah.
And we're addressing that.
Yeah.
Somebody else said, quiet coffee date, both of us prepared, regular time of year, regular check-ins throughout the year to address issues that come up. Mm-hmm. I like the quiet coffee date. I think doing it over a meal, it's too much. It's like a date.
Yeah, it's like a date.
It's too much pressure.
Right.
And nobody wants to eat. And
right.
Yeah, quiet coffee is good. And I like the off-site, out of the office.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that's another great tip that you guys have, is that just to step away for a minute, even if you're taking a walk.
Right.
Can you scroll up and I'll read that one? One more scroll up there. Oh, a little more. This person has a lot to say, and I love it. Okay, the supervisor and the staff member fills out the evaluation form, then has a shared conversation about the answers each one has come up with. It should allow for plenty of time to talk openly and honestly with each other. I still believe that the evaluation needs to be in a professional manner at the job location. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess we can talk about this now. I think it's a slide further down the road, but I think there are two two ways to think about this is, because it's an awkward dance. If you've got the staff person self-evaluating, do you kind of just exchange papers across the table and awkwardly sit there and try to read at the same time? Or do you email them to each other so you each have time to read and absorb and then be thoughtful about it, and then when you come together, that's a whole different kind of meeting than if you're reading your performance evaluation for the first time in front of your supervisor and then having to engage about it, right? It's just a completely different vibe. So think about that as you're thinking about your evaluations, you know.
Right. I just think it can be a little challenging if you're, in a space where you're saying, here's this information, there's paragraphs in this, and I want you to be able to review that, read what I wrote, and actually have some sort of response to each one. It really puts folks on the spot. So I'm not saying that, you have to email it to them way in advance and they read it and they meet with you, but just keep in mind that a lot of nerves are happening during that time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people just can't come up with the best response possible. So sometimes, it could go great. You might want to say, hey, why don't you continue to review that, and we'll meet in a few days just to see if there's anything else you thought about that we didn't discuss today during this time. Because I just think there's a lot of pressure to read through all of that information and to absorb it and then actually come back with a response. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm still a person who I take mine home and then review it again because I clearly can't see everything just because my nerves are still sort of a little,
right,
a little up there.
And especially, I think if you're doing that scale, a numerical scale, what people are typically doing is really, as quickly as they can, getting to that last page and seeing what they were actually ranked.
Yeah.
Right? But if there's a lot of text in there, it's just more to take in. Somebody else said they meet in a conference room, seated neutral. There's not a head of the table, and they start and end with a positive.
Oh, that's great.
That's very nice.
That's really good.
So any other ideas on how you give these performance evaluations? Keep them coming. These are great. And we will read them out loud because I just think it helps everybody.
Yeah.
So setting the stage for longevity, which is of course what we want with staff, right? Especially if you've got a great staff and a solid team. This is just some language to help you as a supervisor set it up for somebody to feel that they're valued and that you really do want them to stay as long as they want to stay.
Right. And I so appreciate when we came up with these slides is just thinking about, part of what you do as a supervisor or as a manager is you want to build folks up so that they stay for a long period of time. The turnover is just so, I don't know, it just takes so much out of us.
Well, it racks the staff and and it's expensive, right? It costs money. Literally, it costs the agency to advertise and hire a person.
Right.
So there's just a lot of investment emotionally and financially to bringing on new staff.
And so we just thought about ways to engage with folks to uplift them, so to sort of just say, you're doing well. And so we just kind of came up with these thoughts about, I see you are developing skills in. Well, of course, obviously, you're going to want to be paying attention to see what they're developing skills in. You also want to, like we talked about earlier, write a note, put it in their file. You demonstrate strengths in. So these are just some languages that you can use, some terms that you can use to connect and to provide positive feedback to folks. You seem like you have a keen interest in, and I really like that one because oftentimes, we're going to get to this too, but you hire folks to do a particular job, but their interest is really somewhere sort of in a different area, and that you're recognizing that they have this skill and this strength to do some other things.
Right, because sometimes, you have a couple of job announcements out, maybe 2 or 3, and you recognize that this one person has applied for every position you have open, right? And it's really hard to figure out, what does this person really want to do, when in fact, when you talk to this person, all they really want to do is start working for the agency, and they don't care in what capacity.
Right.
Right? So, and if this person is skilled and somebody you want to join the team, you'll help figure out, where they fit best. But, it's also kind of a red flag. You got to just watch that as well, because that's a little odd, because people do actually have skills and interests, and putting them in the right slots will only benefit you and the agency and your program in the long run.
Right. And recognizing that says, I receive feedback that you excel in. So what you're saying to the person is that someone's sharing with my manager that I'm actually doing well. So that's actually a boost. That's like a great pat on the back. I mean, I'm sure I would love to hear that from well, not that my supervisor wouldn't tell me, but I would love to hear that.
Well, and I've been told these things throughout my career, and I'll tell you, I really felt valued. I really felt like somebody was paying attention, like they knew what I liked to do. They knew what I did well. So, you know, there are just so many different ways to encourage and, you know, be positive with staff. And I just know, you know, these are just some ideas on what to say if you are trying to figure out what to say, perhaps. But again, I know how I felt when I was told this stuff, and it was very good.
Right. And just having that form of someone giving you their appreciation and recognizing when you're doing something. Those little small bits go a really long way.
Right. And again, the more detailed, the better.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Not, hey, you do a great job. Hey, you're a nice person. That's nice to hear and all, but you know, something super detailed goes a lot further.
Right. Right. So here we have, this is about coaching. So here's an example. Amelia facilitates an evening support group once a week. She seems visibly upset and ticked off the next day. This is evidenced by her follow-up and notes and debrief the next day. So I want to know, what are your initial thoughts are that she is burnt out or hates doing groups? What are your thoughts? So basically, you know, she's upset, and we want to know what you think is going on with Amelia. So go ahead and type in the box what you think is going on with Amelia.
What is going on with poor Amelia?
And how would you, and what would you, how would you support her? Like, what would you say? This is just kind of a coaching process. We'll give you a minute. And there's so many people in our programs that provide an evening support group. And, you know, sometimes folks are happy doing it and sometimes they're not.
Right, right. I mean, back in the day, I did 2 evening support groups, and I loved it because what that offered me the opportunity was to flex my time out during the day, during the week, so I could volunteer at my daughter's school when she was younger. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me in my life at that point, it worked out really, really well. Now, I don't know how I would have felt once she was much older, being assigned doing 2 evening support groups, but, you know, it worked well for me when she was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I've supervised people who did not like doing evening groups. Okay,
So our initial,
hold on, we have a response. Maybe she didn't get enough praise or feel appreciated for doing this part of her job. I would make sure and ask if there is something bothering her, and of course praise her for doing the support group. Thank you for that.
That's great.
Okay, so the next slide is, we have another idea. Looks like you may need to have a break from doing groups for a while. Okay, that is great, but you better have a plan on who's going to do the group, and especially if it's going to be you, right? Are you going to step up and do that group? What is happening in the group that is still weighing on you? That is a great question. Did you sleep last night? Another great question. And what did you do to help yourself? Thank you. Great. Okay, so we're going to bump to the other slide, which is helpful language instead of blaming language. Here you can see helpful, obviously, right? I noticed that you seem bothered about facilitating the support group. This is my own observation, and I want to discuss this. I think that second sentence is key because it's not just, you know, it's not just what somebody told you. You want them to know this is your, as her supervisor, your observation, and that we're going to talk about it. What can I do to support you? Again, that's also a great question always. What can I do? And be prepared for if that answer is, I need you to take over my group for 4 weeks. I need a break.
Right.
Right.
Right. And the initial thought is that she's burnt out and hates doing groups, you know, and it might not be that. It could be that, you know, everyone that's showing up to her group is mandated and they don't even want to be there. And she's just like, oh my gosh, can I just get folks who want to be in my support group? Or it could be that during her support group, there's never any paper towels or toilet paper for folks to use when, like she's short on supplies, right? And she doesn't know how to obtain more supplies. So there could be many things, but just from a distance, when you see someone, our often approach to that is to make an assumption of what's going on, and being able to engage with someone, to have helpful communication, and to say, I noticed that you seem bothered about facilitating the support group. This is my own observation. And that, when June and I were talking about this, is like, we want to be clear that this isn't gossip. I saw this with my own eyes, and this is my observation. I want to discuss it. Doesn't mean I'm correct, but how can I support you? So just being clear about it. And I picked support group, but it could be many things. It could be folks going out into the community. It could be staff meeting, whatever it might be, but just the approach and how to communicate and have conversation, to be clear and supportive, is the best that you can do. And I think June really hit the nail on the head when she said, and be prepared for the answer, because it could involve you doing some more work.
Yep. Yep.
And what's not helpful is, why are you so upset about doing your support group? That language isn't helpful to folks, because we don't know that that's why she's upset, right? So that was an assumption. But actually just providing language that can be helpful. And that same language should play out through evaluations, through one-on-ones, through day-to-day conversation, just being supportive and being helpful, and offering that what your observation is.
And we've got a bunch of do's and don'ts in the next 2 slides, and some of them are obvious, but we're just thinking maybe this is stuff you haven't thought about and could be helpful for you as you do your job. Do's, this top one is about your agency's culture around staff leaving your program and going and receiving training. Now, there are some programs we know that this is encouraged, and they do everything they can to help with funding, with resources, with staff coverage to make that happen. With other agencies, I know the subculture is, we need butts and chairs. We need this thing covered. If you leave and go to a 4-day training, how are we supposed to cover for you when we are barely covered as it is, right? That message is heard loud and clear. But I still think this is a really big do, and that is, to provide the resources for training, because you really do want your staff, and yourself, by the way, to lift your head up and look around and see what's going on past your 4 walls. In your region, in your city, in your state, in your country, right? So to be able to look up and just take a deep breath and look around and see what's going on around you. And I think what happens in so many great DV programs is the work is the only thing right in front of your face, and covering shifts and providing crisis intervention is all you're about, right? But true staff development is getting training and ongoing education about the DV sexual assault field, because really exciting stuff happens all the time.
Right, right. And I think, the next bullet point is about talking about national trainings, and like, who gets the opportunity to do that? Is that an option within your agency for people to take national trainings? Is there money in the budget? Who's going to be the one that gets selected? Is it like a, name in a hat? Or is it you've been here the longest? But I think we really should consider sending folks to training so that they can get more training, come back, share that information, and grow and learn.
Well, I just think there's a lot of drama around who gets to go to the annual DV Coalition conference every year, like the one coming up in Yakima. Woo-hoo. How many conversations have you guys had with your staff about who gets to go? And I understand there needs to be coverage, but it's typically, well, this person went last year, so they don't get to go this year. It's a lot of juggling, and I know it's hard. There's typically line item budget for staff education and professional development, but I also know that most agencies, that money sits there on the table. It does not get used, and it's really sad. So if you've got somebody who's only got maybe $40 a year to get, you're not going to find a training for $40. I promise you that. But if you've got someone who really, really, really wants to go to a big event in Washington, D.C., an NCADV conference, or the Stocking Resource Center conference, maybe pooling all that money instead of leaving those $40 times X number of staff.
So true.
Pooling all that money so this one person can go to this big thing and bring that information back to the agency. It's a wonderful idea,
Right.
you know, and it's just being a little more creative about your budget.
Right. And you might send 2 people. I mean, be creative about it. So you could send more than one person.
And yeah, and also really, Dee and I talked about this. I don't know if it made it into the slide, but really setting up a set aside time during your all staff meeting that this person can report back about what they learned.
Yeah.
Because they come back and they're excited. They've met new people. They've heard new things. They've heard controversial things that they don't maybe know how to process yet and want to talk about with their team. Like, make sure there's more than 5, 10, 15 minutes to really let this person report back about what they've learned and what excites them and how they think it can impact your agency.
Right.
Right.
And we're not talking like folks have to go to a training, you know, wherever they decide to go and bring back handouts for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe one useful tip or information that they brought back, or maybe it's a picture that they took with, you know, the plenary speaker or something like that, that they really enjoyed that person speaking and what they talked about. We don't want people to go and feel like they have to, you know, work hard. You know, they should be listening and learning and then providing some of that information back to staff. So,
right. And also this goes into their evaluation. I think this is a huge, like, step outside the box thing. If somebody puts it together so they can go to a state or a national training, I think that deserves to be in their evaluation, that they made the effort and made it happen. I think that's a great accomplishment for a year.
Right. And I think we have to make room for that. We have to make room for our staff to be able to go.
Right. And again, it's in your agency subculture. If somebody feels like they couldn't or shouldn't go, take a look at that.
Right.
Take a look at that.
Right.
And then we've got a bunch of don'ts. I love this top one because I've seen it happen where you mention another person's staff name in another person's evaluation. Like when I didn't do it, but I mean, you know, I've reviewed past evaluations and I see other people's names appear in this person's evaluation.
Right.
I'm shocked when I saw that. So, you know, just make sure you can say a coworker. I mean, there are other ways to get around this.
Right. And that might seem like, does that really happen? But it does happen.
Oh yeah, it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we've all seen some crazy things, I know.
And we talked a little bit about this, just highlighting what happened in the recent past, because that's all you remember.
Right. This is the halo effect.
Yep. You don't want to do that. Be distracted while you're discussing the evaluation. So if your phone's ringing, you're getting emails, like, you shouldn't be paying attention to those things that are happening. You have to carve out the time, make the time to dedicate it to the person that you're having an evaluation with.
Yes. Turn your phone off.
Turn your phone off.
Just for that 30 minutes, right?
Don't do it at your desk. If you're going to be distracted, don't do it there. Miss the opportunity to talk about the hard stuff. You want to talk about the hard stuff. As challenging as it is to all of us to deal with conflict or whatever it might be, it's important to go ahead and talk about some of that hard stuff that's happening. Confuse staff by mixing difficult conversations with nice statements. So, you know, Judy calls it the nice sandwich, where you start off by saying, oh, I really appreciate all the things that you do on this day, blah, 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 blah. And then you go into, however, you always forget to XYZ, and then you end it with, but I think you're a great person. So it's called the nice sandwich, where you have something nice at the beginning, some little challenge in the middle, or something that you want to bring up in the middle, and then something very nice at the end. That's extremely confusing to people when they walk away. They don't know if they did something right, wrong, or semi-right. They have no idea. So you have to be very clear about when you're giving praise and very clear when you're discussing areas of challenge.
Right. And just like when you don't use the word but. Because you can say whatever you want, but people only hear what you say after the word but, right? So da-da-da-da-da, but, and then the whole preamble to the but is gone. So whatever praise that is. So just be clear. Use your best communication skills and just be really clear and really concise about the message you're trying to send.
Right. Be obvious and give the vibe that this is a checklist. So you don't want to be going off a checklist during their evaluation. And remember, use this time to talk about, don't use this time to talk about personal things. So don't confuse the moment by saying, oh my gosh, what'd you do last night? Did you have a great time? And then you're talking about all this personal stuff before you actually even get into the evaluation. That really can confuse people as to what might be coming up. So if there's something that you need to talk about challenging, you start, if the vibe was awesome, and now you're telling me I did what? That can be extremely confusing to people. If you're going to reschedule the evaluation, please make it because it is it is like the last resort you had to, an emergency came up. I have heard that folks' evaluations get put off and get put off and get put off because the person just wasn't ready to do them. And I think we have to take them very seriously and actually schedule them and do them when we say we're going to do them.
Well, it just sends a message of priority.
Right.
Right? Because if you if that date keeps slipping, the clear message your staff is getting is that they are not as important as whatever it is that's taking priority over your schedule.
Right.
And those messages are loud and clear.
Right. And I love the last one, which I just have to bring up. I know these are bullet points and you can read, but I have to say I had someone take all of my words and then cut and paste them and put them into the evaluation they gave to me and assume that I wouldn't notice. So, please use your own thoughts, use your own ideas. If your staff turn their evaluation in early to you, if you cut and paste what they say, they're going to notice. If you repeat what they said in their evaluation, you put it in theirs, they're going to notice that as well. So folks are smart.
Yeah.
They'll get it.
Well,
right?
And I just want to say caveat here. The only exception to this is cutting and pasting their goals from last year into this year. You want to cut and paste that because that is just documentation that these are their goals. And again, they need to be their goals.
Right.
So.
Right.
So we're going to move into self-evaluations. We touched on this a little bit. What is expected of your staff? And I'll briefly share a stupid thing I did once. When I first started working at the YWCA, it was time for my evaluation, and the expectation was that I would do a self-evaluation. Well, what I did was I filled out the entire evaluation, and it was huge, and I took a ton of time, and I turned it in, and my boss, he was so sweet. He said, "Oh my gosh, June, I did not expect you to do that. It's my job to evaluate you. It's not your job to evaluate you." So it was a funny moment. I never made that mistake again. But again, it wasn't clearly outlined to me what was expected of a self-evaluation. So, you need to make sure your staff knows exactly what they need to fill out, and where they're going to find this form to fill out, right? And then what the expectation is about when they turn it into you. And, again, we talked about this a little bit about do they do it before or during. You need to figure out what works for you. But again, the self-evaluation is interesting because you've got some people that are really, really good at tooting their own horn. Oh boy, they will tell you how great they are 15 different ways, right? And then you've got people who it's extremely challenging for them to do that, and they underestimate what they've done. So, you have to take into account the type of person you've got in front of you and how to best coax out what you're trying to get out of them. But, keeping the self-evaluation simple is best.
Right. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, but we're talking about, oftentimes when each person hands it to each other and says, okay, here's mine, and then you're expected to sit there and read it, how much is that person actually going to absorb, retain, and remember? They might review it, but, figure out what kind of conversation you want to have. Do you want to highlight things? Are there specific things that you want to talk about? If you leave it open-ended, oftentimes people's nerves are really heightened, and they can't read everything. They can't absorb everything. So really thinking about, what is it that you want to talk about specifically during the evaluation? That, like some people said, their forms are 3 pages long or 5 pages long. How long do you have set aside for the evaluation? Is it an hour? Is someone actually going to be able to read 5 pages and be able to comment back to you all of that stuff, regurgitate that stuff in an hour? I just think you have to allow sometimes folks to step away from it and then come back to it and see if that's helpful, if they can absorb it. But remember, if you want it, there's particular things that you want to highlight and discuss. Highlight those things. Talk about those specific things, not everything on the evaluation form.
Right. I think this especially is true if you've got a particularly challenging evaluation to do. If you've got a staff person who's been on a performance improvement plan that you've been working with closely for the past X number of months, and the evaluation is not a glowing one, and you've got some difficult information to impart, Sometimes letting that person digest that and then coming back and having a conversation is the best way to do that. And if you've got someone who's really messing up, here's the thing, guys, they know they're messing up. This is not a surprise. So, you know, just working your way around that and really having, you know, directing that conversation around, you know, is this still a good fit, right? Is this job, this is our time to talk about this right now. Is this job a good fit for you?
Right. You know, and one of my pet peeves was to get an evaluation back where someone took the form and just wrote in it with a pen and was very vague, didn't add much.
Right, like sat there 10 minutes before your
10
meeting.
minutes before the meeting. That says a lot. It says a lot. And what I realized from that is sometimes when folks know that they're going to get the raise anyway, that, you know, they don't care what they write. They don't care what they fill out. Oftentimes people just feel entitled and they feel like, you know, I can say whatever I want to say and I don't have to fill this out. I actually started to hand that back to them and say, if I'm going to type this up and we're going to continue to be professional, I expect the same in return. And so I actually just started giving those back to folks and say, I need you to spend a little bit more time on this. I'm going to change the date, I'm going to change the time, and by then you should be able to provide me with more information and feedback on your evaluation.
Especially when you take into account how many hours you spend on doing one evaluation.
Yes.
And it is hours. It is not a 15-minute little task. It is hours, and it takes thinking, and it takes reviewing stuff. And, you know, if you're doing it right, and I assume everybody is, you know, it's a thoughtful process. Yeah.
All right. We're almost done here. So there's a lot of untapped talent on your staff, and then we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but really, you know, we were just thinking about how sometimes our staff have skills that, you know, they apply for a position and they're doing their job, but they actually have untapped skills, untapped talents that we're not pulling out of them. So creating and sustaining a culture of excellence and trust takes time, and it's difficult to turn a ship around. So oftentimes when you have your staff and things are going like, woo, wacky, you know, understanding your culture, understanding your staff, and then spending time with them, talking with them to really have to turn the ship. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was in a situation where things really went kind of wacky in my office, and I had to find a way to actually turn this around. And one thing that I did was I enlisted the support of an outside facilitator to help with the group, because everyone expected me to fix everything. Well, I can't fix everything. So I got someone to come in and support me and help the staff figure out what's going wrong and how we could turn the ship around. And that really helped.
Right. And I think, though, you don't abandon your expectation of expecting excellence, right? And I think in particular, domestic violence programs are fraught with crisis and drama and high emotion, right? And you've got from 1 to 10, everybody across that scale about how they react to this kind of stuff. So, you know, the workplace can be, those are dicey waters to maneuver, right? And if things start to go sideways, it is really difficult to correct the course. And so that's why, you know, we're saying if your team is dysfunctional, it is extra hard to make that change. And then you're also holding people accountable for what they want to achieve. And the point here is, if through performance evaluations, this all does kind of loop back around, through doing meaningful performance evaluations and working with individual staff, it can help right the group as a whole. Yeah, right. If you just work with people individually, because if you're lumping everybody together, especially when you've got a dysfunctional team, it's not going to fix itself, right? You need to one by one work through the team and tie it back to their job and their commitment to the agency, and things will start to change, but it's not going to be a fast change. Yeah. Right? Because I've worked with fantastic teams and I've worked with less than fantastic teams, right? And they both have different kinds of challenges, but they can both work out. I mean, even like if you've got dysfunction, it can change. It can change. And sometimes that means, you know, a staff change, but, you know, it can change.
Right.
And then again, you know who your overachieving superstars are, and hopefully you have a couple of those on your team. And you also know who is underachieving as well. And chances are you definitely have somebody or some buddies like that on your team, because this is just human nature.
Right.
Correct. These are just people just like us. And I mentioned this before, but they know exactly who they are too. And you need to know how to supervise those people individually, right? Helping them meet their job goals and developing skills and keeping them engaged is what's going to help them, you know, continue to move forward and continue to be a superstar and continue to improve if their performance needs improvements. So our question to you is, how do you handle this in your own program? Could you please type that into the chat box and let us know? Oh, and the piece about untapped talent, the one that I think we have recognized over the years is we have some great writers that we did not know they could write. And they are a huge asset to grant writing and reporting. Contract reporting, and oftentimes, you know, you've got certain, like if you've got a development or an advancement team that does all the grant writing, or if it's just the program director, if it's just you, if you've got someone on your team that is actually interested and a good writer, and you know if they're a good writer or not, you just know, you can have them write parts of the grant, especially around program description, right? Or program results that they're reporting anyway. I just think, you know, tap into that talent, especially if you've got writers on the staff or somebody who wants to develop this skill, right? They want to maybe move on to be fund developers. Who knows?
Right. And my thought is when you tap into their sort of, I call it hidden talent, but and I call it that because it's not their primary job from what they got hired for, but yet they have this gift to be able to either be great proofreaders, or whether they are dabbling in grant writing, or maybe they're great at social change work, but their daily job requires them to do something different. Just finding what folks really enjoy doing and having them do that. I think you can learn so much about people, and it keeps folks in the job longer.
Oh yeah, we had folks that worked at the shelter, like talk about super isolated, right? Working in the shelter, who it just lit them up to go to community events and do tabling.
Right.
And give out candy or do the little spin a wheel thing to win this, you know, like it just got them out in the community. And I just think that's the kind of stuff that really keeps people excited about their job.
Right, right. We used to have the clothesline project at Northgate, and different things that they can get involved in that's different from their day-to-day work really boosts people up. And you'd be surprised at the extra skills that folks have that they're actually not using on the job. So finding ways to get them to use those skills, I think, is really helpful. So does anybody have any feedback about how they, you know, work with their staff when you're figuring out what's going on? Are people doing well? Is there untapped talent? How do you develop that? What does that look like?
We would love to hear your input. Okay, well, please continue to type, and we will share it with the group. Delegate to the team to assist each other. Okay.
I love that. I'm so glad you said that, because I am really on this kick about managers often doing so much of the work, and that oftentimes folks are afraid to share their responsibilities or to teach folks how to do some of their responsibilities. And I say, you know, here's an opportunity to teach some of your staff about what you do. Most folks always want to know, how am I going to advance in this agency? Where can I advance in this domestic violence program? Well, teach them how to do the reporting. Teach them how to do I don't know, some of the grant writing. Show them how to do some of the things that you do, and then maybe they'll be interested in it. Doesn't mean that this person wants your job. They're not trying to take your job, trust me. But teaching folks how to do some of that. I mean, what if there was an emergency and you were gone for a month or two? Or what if you took a sabbatical? You know, how can some of parts of your job be taken on by maybe some of your staff? They might want to know how to do these things. And so delegating to the team actually helps them learn new skills and new tasks, and they can use that and put that on their resume. So I'm glad that you brought that up, delegation. You know, you can call it delegation, or you can call it a learning process, whatever you want.
Sharing the wealth.
Right, sharing the wealth. But I actually did that because I was going to take a sabbatical, and I had to write down. And I don't know, I've talked to a lot of folks about creating a succession plan, and I think succession plans are amazing. They're a lot of work, but they bring you such joy because, one, you recognize all the work that you do. You realize how valuable you are to this agency, because, you know, when you're gone for 2 months, it's like, whoa. But the other thing is, I actually sat down with staff and said, this needs to get done while I'm gone. Is anyone interested in doing this particular project? And so I was actually able to solicit so many people and doing parts of my job that they were really interested in. And we didn't have to hire anyone behind me while I was gone. So it was actually really helpful. And if you want to think about creating a succession plan, that's something you should think about.
And this ends up in their performance evaluation. If they stepped up and they learned this new skill and they did it well, and you've got this direct, very detailed example to highlight in their evaluation.
Right, right. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. I do realize that this is a lot of information, and sometimes webinars are great to provide information, and sometimes in-persons are even better because you get the conversation back and forth. And I think what I really miss about this conversation is, I think if we were in a group all together, the chatter would have been a lot stronger.
Yeah.
So I might have to repeat this again and do it in person, just because I think you guys have so much more to say and folks are holding back.
I agree. I find webinars really challenging. I mean, because I remember participating in them a lot, and I'm sure I was doing exactly what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
But doing them, providing them, you know, it's still fun. We get to get the information out, but you know, we're just like literally, Dee and I are sitting here side by side talking at a computer screen.
Right.
You know, and we would love nothing more than a ton of interaction with you guys. But this medium, it's just not set up to have that kind of interaction, because we know you guys have some great stories.
Right. Oh, I mean, Jen and I, just the two of us had so many stories.
We just keep ourselves entertained all day long. So we can imagine if we had 30 more.
Right, right. So it's really hard to not be able to engage with folks and have that dialogue and conversation, because I'm sure it would have been a rich conversation had we all been together. But I will definitely think about that in the future, and you can also put that in your evaluation. And if there's other topics that you want me to talk about or train on, please give me that information as well. So we're about to wrap up. So if there's any other questions that you have for us, please don't hesitate to put that in the question box. So what's happening at the coalition? As you guys know, the 5K is coming up, and we are about to set off on this great run walk that we have Saturday, July 15th. If you have not registered, please do so. We'd love to see you. We'd love for you to be a part of this wonderful 5K Refuse to Abuse. So please go to our website, register, get folks to register, create a team. You can volunteer if you want. I am going to be volunteering and yelling hooray at people. If you want to be a part of that, you can join me and volunteer with me if you'd like. So please think about that. And then don't forget that our conference is coming up this September, and it is Lead with Love.
And it's in Yakima, y'all.
It's in
the Palm Springs of Washington. Yakima.
The Palm Springs of, I hope they have a pool, right?
They have a sign as you enter Yakima that says the Palm Springs of Washington.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Well, that is September 25th or the 27th. And I encourage all of you to go to our website and look at our speakers that we're going to be having. I mean, I'm telling you, it is a lineup to want to be just there to hear.
And also to plug ourselves, Deidre and I are hosting the Women of Color Caucus one evening there.
Yeah.
And
or meeting agenda, I don't know what it's called, but Women of Color, it'll be a gathering.
There will be candy, old school candy. There will be old school music and dancing.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have fun.
Yep. So just to plug our little event while we have your attention.
So please join us, and I just want to say thank you guys for being a part of this this webinar today. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope that you are able to take some information back to your programs. Please feel free, if you don't see this on our website, contact me. I will send you the PowerPoint. And definitely, if you have other questions that you didn't get asked, email me, call me. leave me a message. I love calling people back. I love talking to people. Emails are great, but I actually love talking to folks. So please feel free to do either. And I just appreciate you guys being here and supporting us at the Coalition. And someone says thank you, and we thank you so much.
I know. Thanks. What a nice way to kick off the weekend, you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if there's other folks that were in your office, please make sure you put them down in the evaluation too. We like to know how many people were actually on the call and on the webinar.
And again, the question, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? Could you please be detailed in your evaluation? Because Dee and I will be tweaking this for next time. So we'd love to know your thoughts and your input on what really worked and what you thought we could pull back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. There's my email. Please feel free to give me a call. And yeah, here we go.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you so much, folks. Thank you.